Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're venturing into a territory that is, well, absolutely central to global commerce, but often kind of invisible until something goes wrong. We're talking about the vast, complex world of procurement and supply.
It really is the hidden engine, isn't it? Most organizations, whether they're making things or delivering services, they don't always grasp how critical it is. Not until things get volatile.
Like a disruption.
Exactly. A disruption, a shortage. Suddenly everyone realizes, hang on, this isn't just about placing orders. This is core business risk we're talking about.
Absolutely. And this deep dive, it's really designed for you, the listener, if you're keen to quickly get the professional essentials, the strategic side of this whole function.
Yeah.
Our source today is very specific. We're using a key professional text. It's the study guide for the CIPS Diploma in Procurement and Supply, specifically the L4M1 core module.
Okay.
And our mission is really just to unpack its title, Scope and Influence of Procurement and Supply.
And that title, it's more than just words on a page.
Yeah.
It's really a professional mandate for anyone doing a proper qualification in this field.
Right.
Understanding this title is job number one. It basically says, look, before you get into negotiating tactics or logistics details, you have to grasp the organizational impact, the sheer reach.
So it sets the scene.
It sets the whole context, defines the strategic playing field right from the start. That's why it's foundational.
Okay, great starting point. Let's unpack that context now, the professionalism involved here. So the first thing that really stands out is the publisher, CIPS, the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. For someone maybe new to this, what kind of authority does CIPS actually have? Why does this name matter so much worldwide?
Well, CIPS has really cemented itself as the global standard for the profession. When you see that CIPS logo on a study guide, and it's part of their formal education path, the Diploma in Procurement and Supply, that tells you a few things straight away. First, it means it aligns with an internationally recognized benchmark of what good looks like. It's not just UK knowledge or US knowledge.
So it's transferable.
Totally transferable. You could be sourcing in Asia, services in Europe, tech in the States. The principles hold. It's a common language.
A shared framework for how things should be done professionally.
Precisely. And the diploma part is important too. This isn't, a quick online course. It's a serious qualification.
Right.
It signals a commitment to a structured, long-term career path. It tells employers, okay, this person isn't just interested. They've adopted a professional approach. They can apply proven, standardized knowledge.
Okay, that makes sense. And that brings us to the level itself, L4M1. Level 4. What does that actually mean in terms of, say, professional qualifications frameworks like the RQF? Where does this person sit in the hierarchy?
Level 4 is a really crucial jump. It's a definite step change in what's expected. At level 2 or 3, professionals are often doing the transactional stuff.
Like processing purchase orders.
Exactly. Processing POs, chasing invoices, basic data entry, just following the set procedures. It's the execution layer, making sure the gears turn.
Following the rules set by others.
Correct. But level 4, that demands operational management capability. You have to be able to analyze, evaluate, and then make complex decisions that often affect multiple departments.
So instead of just processing a PO that lands on your desk.
Right. The level 4 person is expected to maybe do a full total cost of ownership analysis or map out stakeholders or develop a basic category plan or even draft a complex RFP, a request for proposal.
That sounds much more like thinking strategically, less what needs doing and more what's the best way to get this done for the organization.
Exactly that. It's a shift from just efficiency to genuine effectiveness. And because L4M1 is the core module,
right, the foundation,
it means these two big ideas we're digging into, scope and influence, they're considered absolute non-negotiables. You have to get your head around the breadth of the role and its strategic impact before you can really tackle advanced stuff like complex negotiations or contract law.
It's like learning the rules and the size of the pitch before you start planning set plays.
Perfectly put. Master the playing field first, then deploy the tactics.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. It sets up the whole learning journey, and it sets up our deep dive too. Let's break down those key terms in the title itself. All right, the title links procurement and supply. Now, in everyday chat, people probably mix these up all the time.
Oh, constantly.
But at this professional level 4, they mean distinct things, even though they're connected. Let's start with procurement, the P in P&S, the strategic bit. How do we define that professionally? Why isn't it just buying?
Okay, procurement. Fundamentally, it's a strategic process. It's all about maximizing value and minimizing risk before you sign on the dotted line. It's way more than just the transaction of buying.
So it's the whole lead up.
It's the whole life cycle leading up to the contract. Identifying the need in the first place, analyzing the market, properly vetting and selecting suppliers, negotiating the terms, and then formalizing that agreement, whether it's for goods, services, or big works projects.
Right. So the big decisions, who we partner with, how much risk we accept in the contract, the long-term cost structure, that's all procurement's job. Heavy on the pre-contract work.
Precisely. And this is where that level 4 thinking really comes in. Procurement isn't just chasing the lowest price per unit. It has to look at the total cost of ownership, the TCO.
Okay, let's pause on TCO because that feels critical for understanding strategic procurement. What kind of costs does TCO force you to think about beyond the initial price?
TCO is like the engine of strategic procurement. A level 4 pro knows the cheapest initial offer isn't always the best value. TCO makes you add up the purchase price plus all the other costs that pile up over the life of whatever you're buying.
Such as?
Oh, things like maintenance, maybe disposal costs at the end, the cost of poor quality, like failures or returns, admin overhead, holding inventory, even the cost of risk associated with that supplier or product.
Oh, okay. So a supplier might offer a lower price per item, but if their stuff needs constant expensive repairs or creates a load of waste you have to pay to get rid of, TCO analysis would flag that.
Absolutely. It might show that the cheaper option is actually far more expensive in the long run. That kind of pre-contract decision-making, driven by TCO, sourcing strategy, negotiation, that defines the quality and the cost base for the whole company down the line. That's the strategic weight of procurement.
Got it. Okay, now let's contrast that with supply.
Right.
If procurement is the strategic setup, what's the role of supply?
Supply shifts the focus. It's more about the logistics, the operations, the physical flow that happens after the contract is in place.
The doing part.
Kinda, yeah. It's the fulfillment, making sure deliveries happen on time, managing the trucks coming in, handling materials in the warehouse, keeping inventory records straight, ensuring the physical stuff or the service actually gets where it needs to go efficiently and reliably, meeting the internal customer's need.
So this is about keeping the wheels turning, making sure production lines don't stop, or service teams have what they need.
Exactly. Supply management is heavily into performance measurement. Did the supplier actually deliver on time? Was the quality okay when it arrived? Are we holding too much stock, tying up cash, or too little, risking shortages? It's managing that flow of physical goods and the information about them that the contract requires.
Okay, now here's maybe the crucial bit from the title. Why link them? Procurement and supply. Isn't there a risk they just tread on each other's toes?
Well, yes, there is a risk if they act like separate kingdoms in silos, which is exactly what this level 4 thinking tries to break down. Linking them emphasizes the need for integration.
How so?
Well, procurement needs good data from supply. Things like how suppliers have actually performed in the past, delivery times, quality issues. That feedback is vital for making better sourcing decisions next time.
Right.
And flipping it around, the supply team can only run smoothly if procurement has set up the contracts properly. Clear service levels, easy ordering processes, solid clauses about what happens if things go wrong.
So if procurement picks a supplier that's, say, really cheap, but based halfway across the world with a shaky delivery record, the supply team is going to have nightmares trying to manage that.
Precisely. They need to understand each other's worlds, the constraints. The level 4 professional needs that end-to-end view. They have to see that great strategic sourcing means nothing if the day-to-day supply operation is unreliable or costs a fortune. Success relies on that smooth handover and flow between P&S.
Okay, let's tackle the first big word from the title, scope. When we talk about the scope of P&S, we're really mapping out its reach, right? How many activities, departments, markets it actually touches. Let's maybe look inside the organization first. How wide is procurement and supplies reach across a typical company?
Oh, it's almost everywhere, which is why stakeholder management is such a huge skill at level 4. Think about it. P&S influences, or should influence, the spending for pretty much everything the organization buys. And that spend usually falls into two big categories: direct and indirect.
Direct spend. That's the obvious stuff. Raw materials, components that go into the final product.
Yes, exactly. And then indirect is, well, everything else. Your IT, hardware and software, marketing agency fees, HR consultancy, cleaning services, building maintenance, company travel, energy bills, you name it.
Wow. Okay.
The scope of procurement means it ideally has input into the specs and control over the budget for all of those. which means the P&S Pro has to deal with a huge range of internal customers, stakeholders who often have very different priorities.
Can you give an example of that clash? Like P&S pushing for cost savings versus, I don't know, the IT department.
Happens constantly. The IT director, understandably, wants the newest, fastest, most secure cloud service. Maybe they're specifying requirements that are gold-plated.
Right.
Procurement scope includes digging into that requirement, benchmarking it, asking, do we really need all these features? Challenging the spec to make sure it meets the necessary performance, not just the nice-to-haves.
Yeah.
And then using the company's total buying power to negotiate the best possible deal, maybe an enterprise license agreement.
So procurement isn't just taking orders from the IT director. It's acting almost like an internal consultant, maybe even a bit of a gatekeeper, balancing what the department wants with what's good for the company overall financially.
That's exactly the role. The internal scope is about influencing budgets and shaping the quality, cost, and availability of everything the company uses. If you don't control that internal scope properly, you get what's called maverick buying.
People just buying stuff themselves.
Yeah, departments going rogue, doing their own deals, which means the company loses negotiating leverage, ends up with fragmented systems, maybe dodgy contract terms. The Level 4 role is about actively preventing that by showing the value P&S brings to all those internal groups.
That is a huge internal reach. Now let's look outside the company walls, the external scope. How far down the supply chain does a modern P&S professional need to be looking? Is just managing your main supplier, your tier 1, enough anymore?
You know, maybe 30 years ago, people thought that was okay. But today, in this globalized, interconnected world, that approach is just, well, it's dangerously outdated. The external scope expected at Level 4 absolutely demands visibility much deeper into the supply base. Multi-tier mapping and management.
Multi-tier. So beyond the company you directly buy from.
Yes.
Yeah.
You need to understand who their critical suppliers are. Your tier 2, your tier 3, sometimes even further down tier 4.
But why? I mean, if my main supplier, tier 1, promises to deliver, isn't it their problem to manage their own suppliers?
Well, contractually, yes, they hold that responsibility. But from a risk perspective, operational risk, reputational risk, your company is still exposed. Often the biggest vulnerabilities are hidden in those deeper tiers.
Okay.
Like maybe a tiny specialist component that only comes from one specific tier 3 supplier in one particular region. If that supplier had a fire or a strike or gets shut down by regulators.
It creates a bottleneck.
Exactly. A choke point that can bring your entire production line to a halt. Doesn't matter how watertight your contract is with your tier 1 supplier if they simply can't get the parts.
Okay, so the Level 4 Pro can't just sit back and assume tier 1 has it covered. They need to actively seek out that deeper visibility.
Yes, actively. This might involve using sophisticated supply chain visibility software or contractually requiring key suppliers to tell you who their critical sub-suppliers are, sometimes even doing audits or assessments further down the chain.
Wow.
The external scope includes spotting risks, like having too many suppliers clustered in one earthquake zone, or monitoring political instability that could affect a key tier 3 provider. It's also about ensuring compliance, things like labor standards, environmental rules, intellectual property protection throughout that extended supply base. Because a failure way down the chain can blow back and devastate your brand reputation. That due diligence is essential.
Okay, so scope really means breadth and depth. Internally, across all spending and departments, externally deep down the supply chain to manage hidden risks. That massive reach really sets the stage for the other key word, influence. Right, the second pillar, influence. This feels like it's about the impact P&S has, the results it delivers for the organization. Let's start with the most obvious one, maybe the easiest to measure. Money, financial influence. How critical is procurement's relationship with the company's total costs?
It's arguably the most powerful financial lever a business has. In many companies, maybe most, the amount spent externally, the cost of goods sold, the services bought in, everything managed by procurement isn't just a chunk of the budget. It can easily be 50%, 60%, sometimes even up to 80% of the company's total revenue.
50 to 80%, wow.
Think about the sheer weight of that. The majority of the money flowing out of the organization goes through P&S hands, or should. So P&S isn't just about controlling costs, it's a fundamental driver of financial performance. Profitability.
That scale, 50 to 80%, really hammers it home. And this leads to that concept people talk about, the multiplier effect. Can you kind of walk us through why saving $1 or a pound through smart procurement is often way more powerful than earning an extra dollar through sales?
Yeah, this is probably the concept a Level 4 professional needs to absolutely nail to justify their strategic value. Let's use a simple example. Make it concrete.
Please do. Numbers help it stick.
Okay, imagine a company. Let's say it turns over $100 million in revenue a year. And let's be conservative, say its total external spend managed by procurement is 60% of that. So $60 million.
Okay, $100 million revenue, $60 million external spend. Got it.
Now, let's say this company runs on a net profit margin of 5%. Pretty typical for some industries. So they make $5 million in profit at the end of the year.
Right, $5 million profit.
Okay. Now, what if the procurement team, through better negotiating, maybe finding a more efficient supplier, manages to achieve just a 5% saving on that $60 million spend?
5% of $60 million. That's $3 million saved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
$3 million. Now, here's the crucial part. Because that's a reduction in the cost of goods or services, that $3 million saving, pretty much all of it, flows directly to the bottom line, profit.
Wait, so the profit goes from $5 million up to $8 million.
Correct. That 5% procurement saving delivered a $3 million profit increase, which in this case is a massive 60% jump in total net profit, $5 million to $8.
Wow. A 60% profit increase from a 5% cost saving.
Exactly. Now think about what it would take to get that same $3 million profit boost just by selling more, assuming the profit margin stays at 5%.
Okay, to make $3 million extra profit at a 5% margin, you'd need to sell an extra $60 million worth of product.
Bingo. An additional $60 million in revenue.
Hold on. So to get the same $3 million bump in profit, procurement needs a 5% saving on current spend, but sales needs a 60% increase in revenue.
That is the multiplier effect right there. Think about what it takes to increase sales by 60%. Massive marketing campaigns, maybe building new factories, hiring more people, more working capital tied up in inventory. It's huge.
Where's the procurement saving?
Achieved through smart category management, TCO analysis, negotiation. It's high leverage, low inertia, relatively speaking. It's one of the fastest, cleanest ways to boost profitability, especially when market growth is tough. That's the kind of financial influence Level 4 is all about, understanding and delivering.
That comparison is incredibly striking. But okay, influence isn't just about the money, is it? Procurement decisions must have a huge impact on operations day to day. How does P&S shape the stability and the quality across the whole company?
Yeah, operational stability is completely dependent on getting the right inputs smoothly and reliably. So the most direct operational influence is on risk and quality. Procurement decides who the suppliers are and what standards they have to meet. That's usually hammered out in things like service level agreements, SLAs, and key performance indicators, KPIs, during the contracting phase.
So if procurement goes for the absolute cheapest supplier, maybe accepting lower quality materials to hit a saving target, the rest of the company, manufacturing, customer service, they just have to live with the consequences.
Yeah, they inherit the risk, precisely. If you buy substandard components, you might get more product failures, more warranty claims, more customer complaints, more returns. Those costs usually dwarf whatever saving you made up front. A key Level 4 task is actually building and managing a proper risk mitigation plan for the supply base.
Not just listing risks, but planning what to do.
Exactly. Mandating actions like, okay, for this critical component, we need at least 2 qualified suppliers, dual sourcing, or requiring a high-risk supplier to hold a certain amount of buffer stock just for us, or ensuring suppliers have robust business continuity plans.
And the supply side of the function must feed heavily into managing that risk day to day.
Absolutely. Monitoring supplier performance against those SLAs, tracking their financial health, making sure they're actually complying with the contract terms. All of that acts like a firewall, protecting the organization from external shocks, quality failures, delivery delays, supplier bankruptcy. When supply gets disrupted, production stops, services fail, market share is lost almost instantly. P&S influence here is the difference between being resilient and being incredibly fragile.
Okay, financial, operational. Let's zoom out to the really big picture, strategic influence. How does P&S actually help shape the long-term direction, the reputation, maybe even the competitive edge of a company, going way beyond just cost savings?
This is where procurement really earns its seat at the top table, moving from being just a support function to a core strategic partner, especially around things like corporate social responsibility, sustainability, and innovation.
How so? Reputation first.
Well, today, a company's reputation is massively tied to its whole ecosystem, especially its supply chain. By setting really clear criteria when choosing suppliers, procurement directly controls whether the company lives up to its promises on things like ethical sourcing or environmental standards.
Can you make that concrete? How does a Level 4 manager actually use procurement to enforce something like, say, a sustainability goal? It sounds a bit abstract.
It becomes very concrete in the sourcing process, especially in the RFP, the request for proposal. If the company's strategy says, we are committed to reducing our carbon footprint, procurement can't just award the contract to the cheapest bidder anymore.
Right.
They have to build sustainability into the evaluation criteria. Maybe cost is only worth 30% of the score, technical ability is 40%, and then sustainability performance, like evidence of reducing emissions or using recycled materials or fair labor practices, counts for the remaining 30%.
So you're weighting the decision. Procurement's influence makes sure the company's values actually translate into who gets the business.
Exactly. And that protects a company's reputation with customers, with investors, even with regulators. You only need one scandal about child labor or environmental damage deep in your supply chain, even tier 3 or 4, to completely trash a brand that took decades to build. Procurement is the first line of defense for that brand equity.
That makes sense. And what about innovation? You mentioned P&S influencing the competitive edge.
Yeah, suppliers are often where really deep specialized innovation happens. A strategically minded procurement team doesn't just beat suppliers down on price. They look for opportunities to collaborate, to build partnerships. There's a concept called ESI, early supplier involvement.
Bringing suppliers in sooner.
Much sooner, like right at the start of the product design phase. If you bring your key strategic suppliers into the tent early, you get access to their latest technology, their R&D insights, maybe ideas for manufacturing efficiencies you hadn't even thought of.
So the supplier becomes less of a simple provider of parts and more like a partner in creating that next breakthrough product.
Precisely. P&S can influence this by setting up contracts that encourage joint development, maybe sharing intellectual property, or even running specific innovation challenges for their top suppliers. Being able to tap into that external brain power, that external R&D that shapes the company's future products, its growth, its technological leadership. P&S isn't just buying things, it's actively cultivating the external relationships the company needs to win in the long run. That really holistic view of strategic influence. That's the pinnacle of the Level 4 standard.
Wow. It really sounds like when you look at the whole business, P&S is responsible for, well, not just profit, but resilience, operational reliability, and the entire company's ethical stance and future innovation. That is a genuinely huge scope and an even bigger influence.
And that's exactly why this L4M1 core module is so foundational. It forces the learner right at the start to see themselves not just as someone processing paperwork, but as someone operating really powerful levers that directly shape the company's future. #outro.
This has been a fascinating deep dive into what seems like a simple title, Scope and Influence of Procurement and Supply. Just to quickly recap, we established this knowledge comes from CIPS, it's at a professional level 4, demanding real analytical and management skills, not just doing transactions.
Yep. And we picked apart the core ideas. Procurement as the strategic, pre-contract thinking focused on total value and TCO versus supply as the operational, post-contract flow and fulfillment. Linked, but distinct.
And crucially, we mapped out that massive dual impact. The sheer operational scope, reaching across every department internally, managing all that spend, and extending deep into the external supply chain to manage hidden risks.
And then the critical influence, that huge financial leverage through the multiplier effect, the power to ensure operational stability by managing risk and quality, and finally, the strategic influence making ethical goals real and driving innovation by partnering with suppliers.
It really demonstrates that procurement and supply is so much more than a back office task. It's like the central nervous system of a modern business.
Absolutely. And given that, at its heart, procurement and supply is all about managing the organization's web of external dependencies, the partners, the risks, the costs, the innovations from outside. Maybe consider this, listener. How well a company manages the scope and influence in the specific area. Maybe that's the single best indicator of how resilient, how viable it truly is in today's volatile world. If you can't effectively manage your external connections, can you really control your own future?
That's a really powerful thought to end on. Thank you for joining.